doing everything we possibly
And then after that, kind of, you don't have that one common goal anymore.
I think that for, you know, a year and a half or 2 years, I think that in the extended family, it was just such a hard thing to have gone through that we were going through a form of post-traumatic stress.
Difficulties within the family were exacerbated by a book that Tom wrote in 2005. It detailed the police investigation.
My wife said, well, what are your intentions on doing this? And she really didn't want me to continue doing it. I said, you know, if you ever want me to be back to who I am, you just need to let me tell the story and get it out.
In their memoirs, Edward and Lois largely avoided the details of Elizabeth's ordeal by concentrating on their own personal struggle as parents.
They were difficult times. You know, Lois and I were focusing on ourselves and how our family was doing, and those were not easy times for anyone.
I think we're about 80–85% healed from all that, and maybe that 15% you never will. That's just part of life and kind of the scars that everybody carries.
Times like what we went through those 9 months are so difficult and really tries your faith. I mean, if you have faith that there is a God and there is a Savior out there, why aren't you getting an answer? You're praying, why aren't you getting an answer to it? And 9 months, we didn't get an answer.
Brian Mitchell, when he comes into a courtroom, you never know what he's going to do. He's broken into song, which effectively gets him thrown out of the courtroom. He's been disruptive. Hasn't been violent yet, but he hasn't been terribly cooperative with his counsel, so his legal counsel has changed several times.
Miss Barzee originally was less competent than she is now. Mr. Mitchell, however, because of his religious zeal or because of his mental illness, seems to be progressively angrier and seems to be more frustrated with the system. This is the Mitchell that took Elizabeth Smart and took her away from her family.
After 4 years of legal wrangling, Brian and Wanda are now being held in a mental hospital. They face charges of sexual assault and kidnapping. The courts are struggling to decide whether they are competent enough to stand trial.
The United States Supreme Court has told us that we should not force people to take medication without at least having a hearing. And the forced medication is an attempt to restore them to competency so we can try them and to make sure that they are well enough to understand what the proceedings are.
Whether it's all calculated or whether it's spontaneous, who knows? Who knows if he's just saying, this is how I can get thrown out of court.
I sat there and looked at Brian Mitchell, and I just thought to myself, how in the world did you ever get to the point that you have gotten to? How have you become so extreme that you can justify kidnapping a child? He is nothing more than a sex offender.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Since her return, Elizabeth has joined her father as an advocate for child protection. She lent her support to the Adam Walsh Act, which President Bush recently signed into law. The act calls for a nationwide register of sex offenders.
I was of the opinion, these bad things happen to other people. They don't happen to me. And of course, when it happened, you just realize the reality of life, that it does happen. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what your status is, they do happen. We felt very strongly that Rad Kids is a program that teaches options to children.
We felt so good about it that we sent our children through the training program.
Elizabeth, you know, she's definitely aware of what I'm doing, and she has been very helpful to try and support avoiding potential other abductions out there. I know that she would do anything she could to help prevent that.
Elizabeth has not spoken publicly about her ordeal. To America, she has been presented as a powerful image for child protection. Both Edward and Lois believe that controlling the media will allow Elizabeth to look forwards.
How do your friends treat you, Elizabeth? Obviously, you know.
Regular.
They do?
Yeah.
Do they ever ask you about anything, or?
No.
No? They pretty much act
They're
as
just like, say, it's just like you came back from a huge long vacation.
Really?
Yeah.
All of the interviews that she did
don't
were
ask
very
about
controlled.
you or anything.
She was with Katie Couric. The questions were, how are you doing? How's your life going? What are your future plans?
What were you most looking forward to?
You came to the realization, I'm not going to get any details here. I'm not going to find out what happened during those 9 months.
Tonight, the 14-year-old little girl taken from her own home in the night 4 years ago.
Earlier this year, one journalist abandoned the media's respect for Elizabeth's privacy.
And this brave girl is taking your calls.
That night, we had gone on and talked about the Adam Walsh bill. That was the reason we were on there. And prior to going on there, I told Elizabeth right up front, and I've tried to re-emphasize that, you know, anything that is said that you feel uncomfortable about, you know, you just pipe right up and let them know.
Did your kidnappers tell you they would hurt you or your family if you tried to get away?
You know, they did. And I really am here to support the bill and not to go into what, you know, what happened to me, what the whole, like, what is in my past, because I'm not here to give an interview on that. I'm here to help push this bill through.
You know, a lot of people have seen shots of you wearing a burqa. How did you see out of that thing?
You know, I'm really not going to talk about this at this time. I mean, that's something I just don't even look back at, and I really, to be frankly honest, I really don't appreciate you bringing all this up.
I was disappointed, and actually I was upset. It's Elizabeth's life, and she has claimed that life, and she is in charge of that life.
People want to know why she didn't run, why she stayed with her captors for 9 months. And in my investigation, Brian and Wanda had a psychological hold on her that was unbreakable. That it took some outside intervention so that she would get away from them.
Elizabeth is a hero in the fact that she survived, and all of that other stuff is, I just don't think that any one of us, let alone being a young girl, would act any differently under the circumstances that she went through.
While Elizabeth was out there, you know, she depended very much on prayer and a knowledge of who she was, and that one day, you know, she would see us again. I mean, she said to me, I didn't know how long it would be, and it might have been a long time, but I did know that I would see you again.
I have the pleasure of presenting to you, Elizabeth, this National Courage Award.
Since her return to family life, Elizabeth appears to have made a remarkable recovery. She rejoined her Mormon community and after a period in counseling, went back to school. For the past 2 years, Elizabeth has studied music at university.
The biggest miracle to me isn't just that she came home, is that how solid Elizabeth seems.
Elizabeth is, I'd say, an anomaly, given how incredibly well she's done. And I come back to her faith, how strong she is in her faith.
Elizabeth is very much in control of her situation, and Elizabeth is a survivor. You know, I know that she learned a lot of things that I wish she hadn't, but I know that she learned a lot, and from the positive side, able to, you know, take the things that she learned and move forward.
Even though you have the best of all possible outcomes, you still have kind of wounds from being through such a traumatic experience. If there was one lesson that I think is important as far as this is, there's certainly hope. I mean, hope is a great lesson. It's not always completely dark, even in what we think is the darkest time.
As much as it was huge euphoria when she was found, it was huge euphoria because of how tragic it was what had happened before. The chilling part is that if she hadn't gotten found, I think 4 years later, it's pretty obvious she'd be part of that family and part of that compound. So I'm glad it's over, and I'm glad she's back.
I mean, life progresses and life moves on, and I don't live in the past. At least I don't feel like I do. There is nothing more important to me than my family, and having Elizabeth back home has been so wonderful. You know, she has really become herself. She is a strong self, and she knows that nobody has the right to hurt her.
And he put his arms around us and was just do exactly what I say. He put his arm around my mouth and picked me up and put me in his boot.
I just froze. I couldn't talk, I couldn't scream, I couldn't do nothing. But the whole time I was just looking at Lisa, and her face was like bright red and she was screaming, and he just chucked her in, and then, I know it sounds weird, but I sort of just got in myself. I just didn't want to leave her.
I was screaming. I was hoping that someone would actually come out of their house and say something, but no one did. No one was down that road.
Lisa and Charlene had been